Hello there. And this one is called Long-Term Effects of Isolation. And of course this is something that huge numbers of people have been exposed to in 2020. I mean, I'm going to cite my own case because I'm aware that out of all the people I know, there are very few people who have been through quite the degree of isolation I've been through. Of course, this is still nothing like what people have to endure when they are in prison and subjected to solitary confinement, but then that is usually limited to a matter of days or weeks. Of course, this has been going on for months. So the harsh lesson I've had to learn is that the isolation which I have experienced this year has actually had far greater an effect on me than I really was consciously aware of at the time. And in fact, it's only since it's ended that I have actually had a proper and true appreciation of its effect upon me, and therefore its effect upon people in general. And doing a bit of research, I was very surprised and somewhat disturbed to discover that psychologists researching the effects of different things on human beings, they actually rate long-term isolation to be more harmful than physical torture. That was certainly a big surprise to me. I never would have imagined that that could possibly be the case. Of course, it's opinion. Who knows how much truth there is in it. But it does really bring home to us the fact that when people are isolated, there are consequences, there are prices to pay. And for me, it's quite suddenly and abruptly living on my own in Sidmouth to being on an aeroplane travelling to Tenerife, being here, and then all the things that's been going on since I arrived, some of which I've documented in recent films. Wow, is all I can say. No, it isn't. I'm going to be a bit more coherent than that. So this is what I've learned from my experiences so far this year, that gradually what happened to me, the longer I was isolated, and I wasn't completely isolated because I was very fortunate that one family member was prepared to bend the rules and have me visit, which was very, very loving and generous of her. And the other family members I didn't really see hardly anything of for a considerable period of time, except in the middle of it all I did help my niece move house, which was one of my highlights of this year. I just enjoyed doing that so much. The companionship, the hugs, it was all wonderful. But what I'm really wanting to say is that the longer it went on, the less capable I became. And this was something that I was kind of aware of at the time, but I certainly didn't understand it. So give you an example. Those who know me well know that I'm the kind of person that is historically, at the drop of a hat, I just get into a car and drive 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. No question, no problem, don't even think about it. But what I found happening to me was that I wasn't able to do this anymore, like at all. And it was a very strange and disturbing experience. And gradually what happened to me over the months, because of course the first few months that's how things were, everyone was supposed to be locked up, and I was very much in obedience mode at that time, what with going through the grieving process for the death of my mother. So what I began to realise is that when I did go somewhere, even when I went to visit family members that were really happy to have me, and when everything got eased, I started to visit friends, what I noticed is after I'd been away from Sidmouth, and I need to be really specific about this, when I was away from Sidmouth for more than about 4 hours, I started to get uncomfortable. And I felt like I just wanted to get in the car and go back. And this of course did mean that the journeys I was doing were much shorter than I'd ever done before. Maximum length of journey for me was really 1.5 hours ever since the lock-up, as I prefer to call it. And eventually it got to the stage that when freedom of movement was declared, I got friends in different parts of the country inviting me to visit them. And at the time, I really didn't know how to explain what was going on for me and how I was feeling, but I just knew I couldn't do it. So this is a really big, significant consequence for me of isolation, is its reduced capacity, reduced ability. Things that used to be easy to do have gone from easy all the way through difficult through to no, I can't do that. And so I did my best. I sent my apologies and my excuses, but I didn't really have any excuse. I didn't really understand what was going on. I just said sorry, no can do, can't do it. And I do think it was quite hard for some people to understand what on earth was this dude on about. You know, he's Mr. Travel, travels everywhere. How on earth can it be that he can't just get in the car? It's easy enough. You just turn the ignition, foot on the accelerator, and off you go. Just couldn't do it. Yeah, the furthest I could really go was from Devon to Somerset and within the county of Devon. Beyond that, I just couldn't manage. And so that to me was a very significant consequence of isolation, is diminished capability. And another one that I'm very much aware of is actually in terms of physical. I kept on doing my Qigong, thank God I kept on doing my Qigong, but I felt less and less capable in terms of exercise as well. Just wasn't able to walk so far and felt the lack of that. And the other thing I noticed is that I had a very, very heavy reliance and dependence upon reading books. Indeed, I feel that my book reading got me through my months of isolation. Without them, I don't know how I would have got on, to be honest with you. A little bit of Netflix, but far more books than anything else. I do find books such a comfort. And so that's how it's been for me, really. And emotionally, I definitely felt a lot less resilient as well. I think things got to me much more quickly and more permanently, more long term than they normally would. I think smaller things bother me more than they normally would. So really, my eventual conclusion about long-term isolation is what it did for me is it made me less capable to be who I am and less able to do the things that I have always been able to do without even thinking about it. And so my isolation ended, as many of you will know, because finally the flights opened up and finally it was possible for Waxara and I to see each other, and she was looking after her dad, so there's no question about who's doing the travelling. It's me. I'll be honest, I didn't feel up to it, didn't feel capable actually at all. Thought, my goodness me, how on earth am I going to manage that? And it was not easy. It was so not easy. I never really talked about this, but I did find myself at 3:30 in the morning outside Bristol Airport looking for the car park, completely unable to find it, driving here, driving there, driving everywhere, just couldn't find it. And there came a point I thought to myself, you're gonna have to face it, dude. If you can't find this car park, you ain't going anywhere. And somehow that thought was what spurred me into finally being able to find what it was I was looking for, i.e. the car park, and I was able to go on the journey. So it did reveal to me very strongly and very forcefully just how all that isolation had affected me. And so there are different ways to handle things like this. Like a person's got an aversion to spiders, there are different methods, and one of them is actually called aversion therapy, where you kind of stick someone in a place where there's a spider. Usually the spider's contained, but it's like, you've got a fear of spiders, there's a spider, deal. Well, that's pretty much how I felt it was for me. And being a shaman, it's my natural inclination anyway. If there's something that needs to be dealt with, it's just deal with it. So the journey, having to wear a mask for the second time in my life, the first time was to the dentist just a week previously, but not just on for like half an hour, but like 5 hours. Oh my goodness me, yeah, yeah. And then arriving here, and then the mad social world that it is when we're going through all the things we've been going through. First dad being ill and dying, and then the funeral, and then the memorial service, and all these things. People staying guests. And it did feel really extreme, and it felt hard going at times. But in hindsight, I'm so incredibly grateful for it, because what I realise is that sometimes that's the best way to deal with an imbalance, is actually to go and have a darn good dose of the opposite. And so that's what's happened to me, is I've been thrown into socialisation, and I'm so grateful for the fact that that is the case. I'm able to socialise again, I'm able to travel, and it feels so good. And I suppose that's one of the things I would say. This is why some shamanic practitioners, some shamans, what they will do is they will choose to take on a situation of petty tyranny, whereby they are subjected to the capricious whims of a petty tyrant, and they will allow themselves to become, shall I say, temporarily enslaved to the wishes of someone else. This is a good old-fashioned, old-school classic for growth and development and spiritual evolution, because you learn to endure something that most people would run a mile from. Well, ironically, we're actually at a situation where we've been exposed, all of us in the world, to the petty tyrannies of our government. So that aspect of a shaman's development has actually been something that many of us have had to cope with, like it or not. And that is one of the old classics which I do like, which relates to suffering, which is that which does not kill me, only makes me stronger. And so now I'm having the experience, which is an utter delight, because the other thing I didn't mention is that during those months in Tidmouth, I didn't have enough physical challenge, so my body became weaker despite the Qigong. So I've had the enormous pleasure of equipping us with a couple of tools called mattocks, which are, by English standards, very old-fashioned tools. You don't tend to find people using them. People use garden forks and spades, but we got ourselves a couple of mattocks, and we cleared some land, and we raked it and prepared it and watered it, and we put some little plants in that we got from a place which sells simply plants out here. It's amazing. But if you want to buy pretty much anything, whether it's a vegetable or a fruit or a decorative plant, there's people that just grow them and sell them as tiny ones. So that's what I've been doing, and I went to bed last night feeling the burn in all my muscles and feeling like, my goodness me, yes. Okay, so really the antidote for long-term isolation is some socialization and then some physical challenges of some description. Other people would have got it by going to the gym, but for me, I like nature's gym, nature's workout. Get into nature, start growing some plants, and that is doing me the world of good. So it's not to be underestimated, the long-term effects of isolation. And I say the real warning signs to be aware of is diminished capability. When you start to realise you can do less and less and less of the things you used to be able to do, no problem at all, that's like a really major warning sign. And as soon as possible, do what you can to bring yourself back into being alive again. Thank you very much. All the love to you.